In today's video, we are going to answer the question, can you start a whole life insurance policy if you don't live in the United States? Specifically, can you start a whole life insurance policy that's set up for high cash value with a company based in the United States if you're not in the US? And the answer is it depends. What it depends on is the requirements that are set by the life insurance company you are applying with or you're considering applying with. So what we're going to go through in today's video are firstly the requirements that life insurance companies in the US have, and then second, we'll go through a number of questions that people who reside outside of the US have asked us over the years. So let's start off with the requirements, shall we? So number one, what the insurance company is always going to look at when they review your application or when we approach the company and let them know that you're considering taking out a policy with them is this right here. Do you demonstrate a financial connection to the US? If the answer is yes, we can progress on. If the answer is no, they're going to say, we're not going to approve this individual for a policy. Now, if the answer is yes there, we can progress on. We need one of the following. So we've got 4 bullet points here. We have to have at least one of these. Number one, do we reside in the US? And I'll add here, you do not need to live here for 12 months out of the year. If you spend 6 months in the US and then 6 months in Australia or the Dominican Republic or another country that is not the US, you can still be approved for life insurance policy. But they will look at this, or if you answer yes to this question, you do reside in the US, perhaps it's just 6 months out of the year, you can be approved for a policy. Number two, do you work in the US? And you do not need to work here 12 months out of the year. If you travel between different countries for work, you can be approved for a policy. Number three, do you own property in the US? This can allow you to be approved for a policy. Now, a follow-up question that will be asked here is this: do you spend time at that US property? Now, what that means is I cannot just buy property in the US if I live in Australia and say, okay, I've got property in the US, so can I get a whole life insurance policy now? Even though I never once have gone to that property or I hardly ever visit it, maybe it's once every 5 years, it's going to be tough to get a policy, and every time it'll likely be a no. Now, if you own property in the US and you frequently visit that property, now you have a real chance of obtaining a policy with a US-based company. Number four, if you own a business in the US, a similar question will be asked to the last one. If you own a property, if you own a business that has an office in the US, do you spend any time at that business in the US? Physically, are you there? If you're not, it is going to be challenging to obtain a policy with a US-based company. What you'll find is we do have to be in the US when we're applying for a policy. What the insurance company wants to see is that we are spending time at our business that's in the US. If the answer is yes to that question, then we do have a chance of being approved for a policy with a company in the United States. So if we check off any one of those, our chances improve of being able to obtain a whole life insurance policy in the United States. Here's a couple of things we must have. So number one, a US bank account. This is going to be a must every single time, and the reason why is when you look at US insurance carriers, they only accept funds in US currency, and they want that coming from a US bank account. Number two, social security number. This is needed every single time. If we don't have this, we won't be able to get a policy. The next two, so this is beneficial just from an informational standpoint. If you are here with a green card, the answer is usually yes. Where it could be a no, one is if the green card has expired. However, if it expired, but you have an application to renew it and it's pending, the likelihood is that it will be approved, but things are just delayed. That can be a case where you can still be approved for a policy. What you'll want to provide in terms of documentation is one, your current green card, even though it's expired, and then two, the application along with the status. The insurance company might want to postpone the approval until your green card is renewed, and they might approve it as well. So if you are pending renewal, you still have a chance. We get that question sometimes, but in any event, if you said, okay, I want to apply for a policy, we can apply, provide the documentation, and see exactly what the life insurance company says. Another thing that could result in a no here is if you came to the US from a high-risk country and you plan on visiting that country again within the next 2 years, we're going to hit on that in a little bit when we get to foreign countries, specifically high-risk countries. But if we are going to Iraq or somewhere that has a lot of war going on, or a country where there's a lot of disease, that the insurance company would typically say, we're not going to approve you until you get back from that country and you're perfectly healthy. If you plan on going there, we're going to temporarily say no. If you plan on going back to a country and that's where you came from, you will be temporarily told no until you're back and you do not have plans to visit that country again. Visa. So a visa is a maybe. An H-1B visa, which is a working visa, we have worked with individuals on a number of occasions, and they've been able to obtain a policy with a US-based company, specifically one of the major mutual companies, without any issues. The main thing that they have to apply is just a copy of that visa, and it's been a non-issue almost every single time. So if you fall in that category, it is definitely possible, not guaranteed, but it is possible that you can obtain a policy. With the application, so progressing on here, a couple things that are very important to be aware of. It must be signed in the US, and this is the case if you're signing electronically or pen to paper via a wet signature. So when it comes to e-signatures, electronic signatures, most people we work with will sign an application in this manner. Companies track this, right? So if I'm going to e-sign an application outside of the US, they're going to know where I signed that application. So it's not like I can squeak by the system doing that. They still want it signed in the US. Question here, very important question they're going to ask you. Do you have any planned travel within the next 2 years? Sometimes the question is, do you have any booked travel? Meaning, will you with certainty be traveling outside of the US? And if the answer to that question is yes, where? And then also, what's the reason? Is it for business? Is it just a vacation? They do want details on that, and I'll provide information as to why in a minute. But they will ask that question, and they'll ask that question too, even if you're a US citizen residing in the US. The medical exam. So if you have to go through a medical exam, it must be completed in the United States. And then also, once you're approved, the formal policy must be signed in the US. So the formal process, meaning from when you first apply with a life insurance company until when you are approved, sometimes takes up to 6 weeks. On average, it's 2 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it is longer. But if you're visiting the US and you start the application, and then 6 weeks later you're approved, I had to have signed the application in the US, and then when I receive that formal policy, I also need to sign that in the US and also make the initial payment in the US. So that can be a minimum of 6 weeks that I'm in the US before even starting the policy. So it is good to be aware of this information up front. Very important to know that too. Let's progress on here. Traveling to another country. So we kind of hit on this with respect to the question, do you have any planned travel within the next 2 years? Insurance companies ask this question. If you are traveling to another country, some countries are considered high risk. And if you're traveling to a high risk country, you may be denied a policy. Or if it is considered a high-risk country, you will be denied a policy. It's not an outright denial or decline. A lot of times it's a temporary decline. So if you're a healthy individual, you're going to receive ultra preferred or a preferred rating. You're like, everything's good, but I got declined. And the reason I got declined is because I'm traveling to another country. Usually what you'll see in that offer or the memo from the underwriter is, we'd like to temporarily decline the policy. Once the individual returns, we will consider an approval. Why they say consider and not they will be approved is once you return, they're still going to ask the question, do you have any plans on going back to that high-risk country? So when we look at different countries, so here's a nice guide where you can see just in alphabetical order, different countries here. Here's what we've got. So a U results in uninsurable, right? So if we have an A or B country, that is typically a case where the insurance company does not have an issue with it, meaning they'll still approve you for a policy. If it's a C or worse, they're going to begin to look at things. You can be approved for a policy with a C or even a D country. However, they're going to look at it. They're going to see how much time you're spending there. They may ask where you're traveling, what cities you're going to and such. There will be more questions there. But we've got different countries here. So depending on where you're traveling from or where you're planning on traveling to, and this is if you're a non-US citizen or if you're a US citizen and you plan on traveling to some of these countries, the outcome will depend on exactly the country you're going to. Right? France, A-rated. But anyway, we won't spend time going through every single country here. Let's progress on. So let's hit on some questions that we've received over the years, beginning with the first one. So can I have a policy if I'm a US citizen, but I live outside of the United States for 6 months? So, for example, I've got a friend who is a US citizen. He lives in the US 6 months out of the year, and then he lives in the Dominican Republic 6 months out of the year. Can he be approved for a policy? We would need to check the country status. How risky is the Dominican Republic? But if there is not a high risk there, the answer would be yes. That is typically a case where he could obtain a policy. He can start one, no problem. So yes, depending on the country that you're residing in or the country that you're traveling to. Question number 2, can I have a policy if I'm not a US citizen, but I travel to the US frequently for work? And the answer to that question is yes, depending on the country that you're traveling to and from. If you're going back and forth to Afghanistan or Iraq, a country that there's a lot of war over there, the insurance companies look at and say, okay, there's a higher risk of you dying. So as a result, we're not going to approve you for a policy. So that's where we've got to look at the specific country there. Next question, can I have a policy if I'm not a US citizen and I do not plan on visiting the US? No, we cannot have a policy with a US company in that case. Number 4, here's a good question. Can I 1035 exchange a policy that I started in another country to a whole life policy with a US company? And the answer is no. The policy must receive funds in US currency and from a US bank account. So specifically with that, a number of years ago, we were working with an individual who had a policy. They started a policy with us in the US, but they had an old whole life insurance policy that they had started when they lived in India. And they asked the question, hey, I've got this old policy. Can I just transfer it into a new whole life insurance policy with one of the major mutual companies? Because I'm more comfortable with that as I compare the two. And specifically what happened is when we inquired with the US companies, MassMutual and Guardian in these cases, they said no. And the reason why is because the currency, the money that was transferred to them, they required that only come over in US currency. So what the policyholder would have to do is their policy that was started in India was not in US currency. So they would actually have to cash that out, convert the currency to US, and then start a policy. But now that they've cashed it out, a 1035 exchange is off the table. So they would just be starting with a lump sum of money that they could throw into the policy. And the short answer to the question is no, you cannot 1035 exchange a policy that was started in another country with a non-US based company. Question number 5. Can I start a policy if I am a US citizen, but on a military base in another country? We get this one quite a bit. And the answer is no. You must start the policy in the US. So on this point, what I'll add is we've had a lot of these cases, but a recent case was an individual who was on a military base in Europe. He's an IT professional, so he's not in combat or anything like that. Very low risk with that respect as far as his actual occupation. He's on computers most of the day. When he was over in Europe, he could not start a policy with a US company. He was interested in Guardian. So he was planning on traveling back to the US and he was going to be here for a few weeks. Then he was going to go back to Europe and he would be there for about another year. And then he would be back in the US permanently after that. So we explained all of that to the insurance company and they said, okay, when he's visiting, if he applies for a policy, he's approved and he starts during his visit, we will approve him based on what you said, and he'll have to sign off on the foreign travel supplement as well, acknowledging everything that he stated, that he will be back in Europe. He'll be there for about another 12 months, 12 to 18 months actually. But then once he's back permanently. They were comfortable starting a policy with him because where he was in Europe was not a high-risk location. His occupation was not high risk. And he also did plan on coming back to the US permanently. They reviewed the case and they said, okay, we're comfortable with that. And that's exactly what he did. During the time frame he was back in the US, we were able to apply for the policy. He was approved. He was able to start it, no problem. What we did to get a jump on everything is obviously we communicated quite a bit in order to get all of the information needed. And then we actually got a jump on the medical records. We were just trying to get all of the information needed so the insurance company could review his medical records from his primary doctors. So when he came back to the US, he signed, we could expedite the approval process, and we met the deadline because that's what we were aiming for there. So it is possible, but the big thing is here, so we've got the answer no, we must start the policy in the US. So he had to come back to the US, start it, then he went back, and then eventually he's coming back to the US and they'll be here permanently. So I should put it depends. But if you're uncertain after looking at all of the information in this video, reach out to us, or you can reach out to us or your agent if you have an agent that you've already got a relationship with, and ask questions, provide details on your specific situation, and we'll let you know. If we don't know the answer, then we'll reach out to the insurance company or multiple companies explaining your situation and then let you know yes or no. Here's the answer, you can start a policy now, or you have to wait until you get back, or here's the steps you need to take. This way you've just got transparency. So the last thing I want to hit on is pretty cool here as far as the benefits of a cash value life insurance policy for a non-US citizen. So this is something a lot of people aren't aware of, particularly point number 3. But let's start off with point 1. So firstly, risk diversification. What are the core benefits to a cash value life insurance policy? Safe, liquid, tax-free area to position money. Tax-free if we don't trigger a taxable event, such as cashing the policy out with a gain or a modified endowment contract. Number 2, tax advantages. So if you are a non-US citizen, perhaps you're considered a foreign national, meaning you reside in another country, but you do visit the US, maybe you're here 4 to 6 months out of the year, the cash value can be accessed in the same manner, meaning you can use it tax-free, as what a US citizen would receive. So the cash value treatment is still exactly the same. Here's the really cool part, point number 3, and this is more on the death benefit side from an estate planning standpoint, but if you plan on using the cash value and then looking at the long term with respect to the death benefit, here's a nice advantage. So if you are a foreign national, meaning you reside in another country, but you do spend time in the US, maybe you're here on a visa or a green card, you're here and you qualified for a policy. If you personally own a policy and you're the insured, so it's not a case where you own the policy on someone else, whether it's on an employee or a family member. If you are the policy owner and you're the insured, check this out. There's no US estate tax on the death benefit of a life insurance policy for foreign nationals. So if you have a large taxable estate and you're a US citizen, the death benefit proceeds are counted as part of your taxable estate. So if I have a $50 million net worth and a life insurance death benefit is part of that $50 million net worth, it's included in the taxable estate, and that can be a big bite in estate taxes. Now there's ways to work around that, or lessen the tax hit if I put it in an irrevocable life insurance trust. There's other things I can do with creative tax planning. I'm not a tax attorney, but there's things you can do that we've seen quite a bit. With that said, if you are a foreign national, here's what you can do here. You can own the policy as an individual. The life insurance is on you, and there's no US estate tax. So if you have a $10 or $15 million death benefit and you have other assets in the US as well, guess what happens? that death benefit is exempt from estate taxes there. I hope that this video was helpful if you are considering getting a policy or you're wondering if you can take out a policy and you do not live in the US. If you have any questions, feel free to email us direct. You can also leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe for more. And as always, I hope this helps. Hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.